Hey everyone! Tonight, we're diving into the shadowy chambers of medieval palaces, where absolute power collided with unbridled desire in the most spectacular ways imaginable. We're peeling back the gilded curtains on rulers who treated their kingdoms like personal playgrounds, and their subjects like pieces on a chessboard. So, grab something to drink, settle in, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always incredible to see this community span across continents and time zones. Now dim those lights, maybe put on some soft background noise, and let's step into tonight's journey through the twisted corridors of medieval power. Picture this. You're living in an age where divine right isn't just political theory, it's absolute reality. Where kings don't just rule countries, they own them. Every person, every castle, every grain of wheat belongs to them by the grace of God. And when you combine that level of unchecked authority with human nature's darkest impulses, you get stories that would make modern scandal sheets look like children's bedtime stories. Tonight, we're exploring the rulers who turned their courts into theaters of passion, betrayal, and bloodshed. Men who collected mistresses like other people collect coins. Monarchs who started wars over love affairs and ended marriages with executioners' axes. These weren't just political figures. They were walking catastrophes wrapped in silk and crowned with gold. We'll meet kings who kidnapped noble women for their entertainment. Emperors who built entire palaces just to house their rotating collection of lovers. And rulers whose romantic entanglements sparked international incidents that reshaped the map of Europe. This isn't the sanitized version of medieval history you learned in school. This is the raw, unfiltered truth about what happens when absolute power meets absolute corruption. Let's start with a monarch whose very name became synonymous with marital chaos. King John of England, ruling from 1199 to 1216, wasn't content with simply being one of the worst political leaders in British history. He had to go and become one of the most scandalous as well. John didn't just take lovers. He collected them like trophies. His approach to romance was less courtly love and more systematic predation. The man was notorious for what medieval chroniclers delicately called his lack of temperance with women. That's 13th century speak for he couldn't keep his hands to himself around anything in a dress. John had developed a particularly charming habit of kidnapping noble women, imprisoning them in royal castles, and keeping them as his personal entertainment until he grew bored or found someone new to obsess over. His technique for destroying powerful families wasn't through military conquest or political maneuvering. It was far more personal. He'd seduce the wife, humiliate the husband, and then charge the devastated family double taxes for the privilege of being betrayed by their king. It was efficient, cruel, and absolutely devastating to the social fabric of his realm. Court records show John maintained at least 30 official mistresses simultaneously. That's not romance. That's a logistical nightmare. The man needed a staff just to keep track of his affairs. Several barons complained directly to the crown that John was abusing their hospitality, which was medieval diplomatic language for he slept with everyone in our household, including the servants and possibly the livestock. The situation became so extreme that one baron refused to meet with John unless his entire household was locked away first. Imagine being so notorious for your inappropriate behavior that nobles had to implement lockdown procedures just to have a political meeting with you. That's next-level dysfunction. But John's romantic chaos wasn't just personally destructive, it was politically catastrophic. His behavior nearly sparked a full-scale rebellion, not because of taxation or military failures, but because half his nobles were afraid to leave their wives unattended during royal visits. The man was single-handedly destabilizing his own kingdom through his inability to control his appetites. And the most remarkable part? John never saw himself as the problem. In his own correspondence, he genuinely believed he was irresistible to women. There's absolutely no historical evidence supporting this delusion outside of his own letters. But when you're king, apparently reality becomes optional and self-awareness gets checked at the palace gates. This pattern of royal excess and romantic destruction wasn't unique to John. Across medieval Europe, crowns seemed to amplify the worst human impulses rather than elevate them. Power didn't corrupt these men so much as it gave them the resources to indulge corruptions they already possessed. In our next segment, we'll journey to France, where we'll encounter a king whose mental illness didn't stop him from maintaining one of the most scandalous love affairs in medieval history. We'll explore how madness, mistresses, and political intrigue created a royal triangle so bizarre it defied both logic and decency. Charles VI of France ruled from 1380 to 1422, and his reign perfectly exemplified how mental illness and royal scandal could intertwine in the most extraordinary ways. Known as Charles the Mad, he earned that nickname through a series of increasingly bizarre episodes that would have ended anyone else's career, but somehow only amplified the drama surrounding his love life. Charles began his reign with genuine promise. Young, handsome, politically astute, but somewhere in his 20s, his grip on reality began to slip in spectacular fashion. He started believing he was made of glass, insisting his servants wrap him in layers of padding so he wouldn't shatter while walking. He'd run screaming from mirrors and refuse to bathe because he was convinced water might dissolve him. Now, most kings who think they're fragile glass figurines tend to avoid romantic complications. Not Charles. He somehow managed to juggle a severe mental breakdown, a politically arranged marriage, and one of the most public affairs in medieval French history, all simultaneously. His wife, Isabeau of Bavaria, found herself married to a man who alternated between lucid political genius and complete psychological collapse. Meanwhile, Charles installed his mistress Odette de Chandivers directly into the palace as his official comfort woman. That was medieval code for "don't ask questions, just pretend this is normal." Odette possessed either the patience of a saint or the survival instincts of a professional courtier, because she stayed with Charles through his most unhinged years. Picture this scene. Odette would brush Charles's hair while he explained in elaborate detail why sitting down might cause him to explode into glass fragments. She'd help him into multiple layers of padded clothing so he could attend court functions without shattering. Nothing says passionate romance like strapping your royal lover into what was essentially a medieval bubble wrap suit. But Charles wasn't content to keep his madness private. He hosted court entertainments that regularly went catastrophically wrong. During one infamous event, he and his friends dressed as wild men in highly flammable costumes and danced around with open torches. Predictably, someone dropped a flame, and several courtiers burned alive while Charles watched in horror. His survival that night was pure luck, but his reputation never recovered. Despite everything, Charles managed to father 12 children, though court records don't specify whether he remembered their names or if he thought they might also be made of glass. The man ruled France into near ruin, while simultaneously maintaining a love triangle so bizarre it made palace gossip sound like medical case studies. Moving south to the Iberian Peninsula, we encounter Pedro the Cruel of Castile, whose approach to romance made Charles's glass delusions look almost reasonable by comparison. Pedro ruled from 1350 to 1369, and his idea of courtly love involved obsessive jealousy, political kidnapping, and the occasional convenient murder. Pedro fell violently in love with Maria de Padilla, a Castilian noblewoman he may or may not have secretly married. The secrecy was crucial because he was simultaneously being forced into other marriages for political alliances. His solution? lock his official wife Blanche of Bourbon in a castle 3 days after their wedding ceremony because he decided Maria had prettier hair. Blanche spent the rest of her life imprisoned, while Pedro openly flaunted his obsession with Maria. When Maria died, Pedro reportedly wept for days before ordering that she be declared his legal wife retroactively. This wasn't romantic devotion. It was psychological breakdown with royal authority behind it. But Pedro's passions extended beyond Maria. He collected mistresses with the same intensity other kings collected territories. When one tried to leave him, she was found in pieces. His political enemies met similar fates, often while Pedro watched from his balcony with whatever woman currently held his attention. Contemporary accounts describe Pedro hosting executions as entertainment during romantic dinners. That's not passion, it's sociopathy with a crown. His idea of impressive courtship involved showing potential lovers his collection of severed heads while explaining which one had most recently disappointed him. Eventually, Pedro's own half-brother killed him in what historians diplomatically call a family intervention. But his legacy as Europe's most aggressively unromantic romantic endured. He'd turned love into warfare and warfare into theater, all while wearing a crown that somehow legitimized his complete disconnection from human decency. These weren't isolated incidents. Across medieval Europe, absolute power seemed to strip away every social constraint that might have prevented these men from acting on their worst impulses. They ruled kingdoms, commanded armies, and controlled the fates of millions. But they couldn't control themselves. Tonight, we've witnessed how unchecked authority transformed human desire into something monstrous. These weren't love stories. They were cautionary tales about what happens when power meets passion without wisdom, restraint, or basic human decency to guide them. The medieval world gave us magnificent cathedrals, brilliant literature, and groundbreaking philosophy. But it also showed us that crowns don't elevate character. They simply amplify whatever was already there. And when what's already there is dark, the results echo through history like warnings carved in stone. Thanks for joining me tonight on this journey through the shadowed halls of medieval power. If you enjoyed this exploration of royal scandal and human nature, let me know in the comments below. And remember, absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it reveals. Sweet dreams, everyone.